Hi, I'm Sai, and welcome back to my channel called Nugget of Wisdom. Um, Sometimes I just get inspired to talk about things, and it's a feeling I have about something that is very important to me, and I just have to switch on my recording device and express it. And I think what's really important to me is to express that I believe that most of the major human problems that we see in the world today, the suffering of groups of people, wars, conflicts, all sort of around politics and countries and tribes and religions and cultures. I think all those problems are actually very simple to solve. And most people would probably just stare at me and go, "Are you for serious? These problems are complicated, they're difficult, they've taken a long time to manifest, they've gone on for years. It's not easy to fix these things, and if we make a small amount of progress, we'll be lucky." And I think in many ways that just makes those people feel better about not being able to solve the problem, because they don't think they're simple. And if they were to think those problems were simple and easy, they'd almost feel like it's very silly. And the analogy I have is, a group of people buying a Ferrari, and there's no manual for the Ferrari. They've never really driven a Ferrari before. They've spent a lot of money on this Ferrari, their life savings. And when they drive this Ferrari, they discover it only does about 20 miles an hour. And when they drive it, it's really difficult to drive because they have to constantly look backwards all the time. And it's difficult to maneuver. And they're very disappointed. They don't really bother to try and find out or look at the manual. They don't want to find out how this thing works. They just think it must be the manufacturer, it must be the garages sold it to us, it must be the mechanics, it must be somebody has damaged it, it must be the person who tried to drive it first. And they all are arguing and arguing and arguing, and no matter what they do, they can't solve the problem. And different people get in and try to drive it, and nothing works. And then they start setting up groups of the ones that are saying, "You guys destroyed the car, you guys are driving it wrong. If we had a chance to drive it, we would be able to fix it. We know what's wrong." And it's all arguments and arguments. But there's a boy, a 10-year-old, say, watching this, and he loves vehicles, he loves cars. And he's smiling because he understands from reading the manuals and from understanding the car and his love for Ferraris and how they work, that they're just driving the thing in reverse. That's all they're doing. They're just driving in reverse. And when he puts his hand up and says, excuse me, I know what to do, nobody listens. You're a kid, you don't know what you're talking about. Let the adults, we know what we're doing. No, but I know what's causing your problem. And even when they give him a chance, just a small chance, to express himself, and they feel in their hearts he could be right, they blot it out. No, he's just a kid. We'll be humiliated. We've been fighting each other. We've been arguing. We've been blaming the service people, the garage, the mechanic. We've protested at the garage. We're going to look like fools to discover that it was just that. So they don't want him to do it. They don't want him to show anybody. He starts to become the enemy. And if he decides, well, I'm just going to get in there and I'm going to show them, because he's so filled with this desire to help, to show them, he's probably going to be stopped, restrained, put back in his box. And you may find then that he's cast out of his society, so the only thing he can do is to just say, oh, well, perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps they're right. If I want to be accepted in this group, yeah, perhaps they're driving it the right way, and it's nothing to do with the fact that they're driving it in reverse. And often it's the people who are brave enough to push and push and push, jump in the car, grab the keys, and start driving it forward. And everybody goes, that's what it was. And society changes, and the problem gets solved. But it takes a very brave person. And I think it's very much like that. We as a society are in many ways getting the results collectively that we deserve, because we're not willing to look inwards. We look outwards. We blame others. It's your fault. It's your fault. It's their fault. And what does that do? That makes us feel good. That makes us feel good, because if it's their fault and they're doing these bad things, then we must be the good ones and they must be the bad ones. So that helps us. That sort of makes us feel better. And looking in is like looking at the manual. Looking inward is like getting the Ferrari manual and figuring out on section 3 that it tells you put the gear in this location to go forward and this location to go backwards. And then you go, oh, how silly were we? But that's fine. We didn't know. And now we know what to do. Looking inwards, introspection, looking in, it's about us beginning to say, maybe there is potentially simple solutions to our problems. And maybe we're part of the reason why we have these problems. Not them out there. No, I am part of the reason. And it doesn't matter. I didn't know. But this is a good way for me to start to figure out how I solve these problems. And if you look at the video I did on just simply writing to your MP, 5 minutes it took me, write to your MP to express your concern about a particular major event. This was the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza and the deaths of thousands of people for me. It took me 5 minutes to write the letter. I sent it to my MP. I'm still awaiting a reply. If I don't get a reply, it's irrelevant to me whether she replies or not. If she replies and it's positive, I will definitely vote for her. If she replies and it's negative and it doesn't align with my understanding of what's going on, I will not vote for her. And if she doesn't reply, I will not vote for her. And I'm just an ant. One tiny little piece, but a very important piece. And if millions of us did this sort of thing very quickly, the problem would be solved. Grumpy Cat on YouTube, I think it was 55 million views from people. Look at, Joe Rogan and Russell Brand and all these people who are on there every day talking about the big issues of the world. A lot of it very conspiracy orientated. These people are trying to control us. No, it's these people. If they were to just figure something out that was really, active. Here's the template. This is what you need to do. And they could get people on board to do that. They would make such a massive difference. I believe within 5 years, so many of the problems that are generated by us human beings would be resolved. But we're not doing that. And it's really interesting. I could sit here and go, how am I going to get more subscribers? How am I going to get more likes on my videos? Well, not this way. Because most people will not want to know this message. But in the end, at our core, we want to live in a more peaceful, loving, caring, respectful society that's sustainable for our children. So the way I look at it is, whatever the story is, if that story achieves that, then we've got to look at it. And I think for us, fundamentally, the story is about ourselves, all of us. And this introspection, it all links to the kind of traumas we had as children. The collective traumas we have from wars, generational wars, famine, hunger, racism, discrimination, whatever. Most of us are wounded in some way. Most human beings are wounded in some way. And we respond to this wounding by creating a hard shell, by creating and configuring a type of ego to protect us from those wounds. And those wounds, at the core, they lead us to believe that we're not good enough, that we're ugly, that we're unworthy, that we're silly, that we're bad. And so we build this shell of an ego around ourselves that basically sends the message out, it's all of them that are bad. It's those out there that are bad. Because we're trying to deflect away from this feeling that we're just not good enough. And this pervades our society. If you look at and I've mentioned in our videos, the whole economic model of our society. On that graph, the more people feel they're not good enough, the more they buy. The more satisfied, happy, peaceful. The more they realize that they are love, that they are beautiful creatures. And that at our core, we are this, peaceful, loving creatures. The economy starts to collapse. Because people are not drugging themselves up. They're not buying things, services, alcohol, sugar, all that sort of stuff, experiences. They're just peaceful, like the Buddha sitting under a tree, under the Bodhi tree. They don't need anything, really, just the basics. And so, these traumas, what happens is stories get built around them. Morals are created. Beliefs are created. Memories, unresolved issues and stories that create memories in society. To keep flowing through to remind us that we're not good enough. Our tribal and religious doctrines, our dogmas. If you look at the main Western religions, which are really at their core beautiful religions, beautiful and amazing people, Jesus and Christian mystics and all sorts, amazing, beautiful people, we turned it all into some stories to make us feel we're not good enough. We're sinful, we're dirty, we're not deserving, unless we do these things, unless we get ourselves into someone else's story and let them take control of us. And we enslave ourselves. So our religions, Western religions, highly contaminated with all these narratives and stories to fundamentally make us all feel we're just not good enough. And then, of course, the ego self becomes the identity. The ego self becomes us. When the ego self is just thoughts and stories. It's just stories. Come and go. But we grab onto these stories and we turn them, we carafe them into the persona. The identity. And we cling to that identity. I am of this religion, I'm of this politics, I'm of this country. And then we have conflicts based on these stories. And it becomes impossible. We manifest exactly what we expect to happen, which is it becomes impossible to solve the problems because there's so much nonsense stories. Or not so much nonsense, but stories that no longer are valid. Stories that probably were valid in other times, in other areas, in other times of our lives, that really do not have any legitimacy anymore for the particular issue that needs to be solved. And we create nonsense stories. Just look on the internet. It's full of conflicting nonsense stories about who's to blame. Often totally ill-evidenced, paranoid. And this goes on in mainstream media, on the internet. It's not the domain of conspiracy theorists. In fact, some of the conspiracy theorists I've looked into are the exact opposite to conspiracy theorists. They're actually outing conspiracy theories and nonsense theories that have been around for us for generations that we've believed, especially from mainstream media. So you get these stories that are created where the conspiracy theorists are trying to create a story that the others are conspiracy theorists. But in reality, all of it doesn't mean anything. If you really go back to the fundamentals, can we solve problems? Yes, it's easy. If we can just push all that stuff away. Imagine your true nature is the sky. And the clouds are all these stories. Well, the clouds aren't the sky. The clouds come and go. And so when the clouds are gone, you're back to a clear sky again. And then you can, with a clear heart, with a clear mind, you can go, that's what we will do. I, the President of America, will use this fantastic technology to have a real-time, or as close to real-time, video call with the Chinese president, with the Russian president, with the heads of the European Union, with the Iranians, with the Israelis. We will just talk to each other and say, okay, let's just stop what we're doing. Let's stop it all. Let's meet up and figure out what we're going to do here. Easy. The Pope could just walk out tomorrow morning. He's got a YouTube channel and say, I want all of you world leaders to come to the Vatican next week. I'm going to invite you over to have a fantastic meal and you'll spend a weekend together. And I want you guys to start to come together to resolve these problems we've got. It's unacceptable. They might disagree and say, no, we're not coming. But just the weight of him saying that would have huge implications. Somebody who is taking a leadership role in the world, that's all, just being a leader. Nelson Mandela, a guy who spent all his life in prison, could have hated everybody. He didn't do that. He solved the unsolvable problem. Resolved the unresolvable. And there's loads of examples through history of this. So, we can live like zombies. I've seen these zombie movies, where you've seen them as well, with these people are walking along in the street and for a period of time, is it 24 hours? All these dead people are walking around. Then you can't reach them, you can't talk to them. We can all be zombies and just accept all these stories and all these ideologies that we were born into, that we didn't even create for ourselves. And then we promote them and we reflect them out. We can stop for a second and say, none of this stuff matters. None of it actually matters. The Israeli, the Jew, the Palestinian, the Muslim, the Russian. Well, which Russian? Probably 190 different ethnic types, groups of Russians. All of them. The British man, the American. We're all brothers and sisters, all of us. And at our core, we know this. And then nature gives us technologies to help us feed the world, to help us make sure everybody is warm enough at night, to help us create materials that keep us warm, to clean our water, to capture the sun's rays. It just gives us unconditionally so much. And what do? We do a little bit of a modification we create a little bit of a technology, again given to us through, intuition. And then we say, oh, but it's our idea. We created this, and now we will sell it to the highest bidder. If we as humans could take the sun's rays, we'd probably block it out And we'd say, I'm sorry, but unless you do this, 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 and this, get a mortgage, you cannot have any sun. But the sun just shines, gives all its energy to us for free. So there's a guy called Alan Robarge. I will put a link to a video of his. And I think this guy, he is fascinating. And I've listened to most of his videos, and he's much more articulate and much more in-depth in explaining some of the things I've touched on here. And in particular, I think there's a beauty about what he says, especially with respect to the very simple idea that at our core, we are all love. All of us are love. And what is love? It's a unity. It's an unknowable unity. We're all one, basically. And at our core, we know this and we're striving for it. And when we strive for this love, we do some of the most cruel things because we completely and utterly misinterpret what we really are and how to get that love. Love becomes this transactional pleasure to give us a temporary respite from pain and suffering and trauma, which isn't love. But once we know at our core, we are all love, and we're all one, and we're all brothers and sisters. And if I needed a heart transplant, any of those cultures and religions and races of people with just the right blood types or whatever would be able to, if they died in a car accident or whatever, I would be able to have their heart and live. I'm the same species of them, no matter what colour, size, shape, religion they are. We all know this. So if we can get to this point where we realise what we truly are, we are incredible beings on this planet. We have some amazingly interesting gifts, our consciousness, our ability to be aware, our wonderful ability to manifest things through technology and science, our stories, our poetry, our music, our creativity. It's incredible. If we can realise this, then a lot of these traumas that we have can start to just disappear. We can accept them. We can say, now I understand. Now I understand why we've been doing this. Now I can stand back and look and say, it's my ego. It was just trying to protect me. It's a collective ego. It's collective stories and narratives that have come from generations because these people had a tough time, because they were trying to survive. So I can look at that and go, I see. I don't have to disown any of it. I don't have to, even if I'm in a religion that my parents and grandparents and everybody else were dogmatically connected to, I don't have to just disown it. In fact, disowning is another rabbit hole. It's another war we're starting. You don't disown it. You say, yes, I can see why my brothers and sisters and parents and all those people did what they did, why they behaved the way they did. And they did it out of love. But it's not the best way. There are better ways now, simpler ways. You can act out of respect and out of love once you know what you really, really are. Fundamentally, what you really are. And that knowing is not an intellectual knowing. And that's very hard for people to grasp because they want to know. You say when you know who you are you? Intellectually, it's unknowable. But we all have periods where we know who we are, where we're totally at peace, where our thoughts aren't completely creating narratives and taking us over. When you cradle your firstborn just after it's born. When you go outside and look at a rose and you smell the rose. All these aha moments. When you lie in the grass in the sun and you just relax. When you feel connected to everybody. When you feel peaceful. That's when you know you're in the flow. That's when you know who you truly are. And when you can really understand that you're not your thoughts, you're not this body, you're not all these stories, you're not the programming, but they're really, really important, or were very important, and you respect them, but they don't control you. When you get to that place, it's so simple to solve all the problems of the world. So I hope that you listen to this particular video by Alan. The title on the video is a little bit off-putting, so I kind of ignore that. But I think it's well worth watching, and it explains in a little bit more detail, why our problems seem so difficult to solve in the world, and why I believe they're so simple to solve. So thanks for listening, and see you soon.